Hello, everyone. Good morning and welcome. My name is Jeremy Leffler. I work in the policy office at the National Science Foundation, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to another session of the NSF Virtual Grants Conference. Now pleased to present this session, which will cover the programs in the NSF Directorate for Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships, or TIP. This session will be presented by Barry Johnson.
Well, welcome, everyone. This is a session on the Directorate for Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships. My name is Barry Johnson. I'm Division Director for the Division of Translational Impacts, and you'll see my information on the next slide, but I'm delighted to be with you. Look forward to giving you an overview of our directorate and explaining some of our programs, and also look forward to answering your questions. And so please feel free as we go through the session to place questions in the chat or hold them for the end, and we will certainly address them. So looking forward to interacting with you. So again, my name is Barry Johnson, and you can see the division that I'm a part of. I'm responsible for the Division of Translational Impacts, which contains most of our so-called lab to market programs. And I'll describe those in detail as we go through the presentation. But first, I always like to start my presentation with the NSF mission statement, and I've put it in a graphical form here, but I think it's important to understand and to relate to the purpose of our directorate, Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships. And the mission is quite simple. It's to promote the progress of science. This has been NSF's mission for 70-some years, and starting in 1950 when the foundation was established. So the mission begins with promote the progress of science, but it goes on to state that we do that for a reason. We do that so that we can advance the national health, prosperity, and welfare, and secure the national defense. Those are the primary elements of the mission statement. And if you think about what our new directorate TIP is all about, we certainly are promoting the progress of science, but we are directly addressing issues that relate to health, prosperity, and welfare for our nation and the national defense. And you'll see that in the many programs that we have as we go through and look at the purpose for each and every one of these programs. And so, this new directorate was created in part because we really are, we believe, at a pivotal moment for the nation and society. We're dealing with a lot of major societal challenges: climate change, equitable access to education and healthcare, critical and resilient infrastructure. I could make this list much longer, but I wanted to just illustrate a few. And part of our purpose within our new directorate is to directly address some of the critical challenges that we face as a nation and as society. And if you dig a little bit deeper, we'll see that we believe that engineering and science and our enterprise, our community, can meet the challenges that we have in front of us. There are a lot of things that we are dealing with ourselves, and we want to leverage in order to meet these societal challenges. First is that the pace of discovery is accelerated. We have more data, we have new emerging technologies. Things are changing moment by moment and accelerating as we move through this process. And you'll see that is one of the things that we want to do as a directorate, is to take advantage of this acceleration, make things happen faster, and also address the societal challenges that we see. There's also an increasing demand for societal and economic impact. We, as a National Science Foundation, are being challenged to show that we are addressing societal needs and having an impact positively on the economy of our nation and, quite honestly, our world. To do this, we need more than ourselves. We need partners. And you'll see in our directorate that word partnership is incredibly important. I'll show you some examples of partnerships that we've built, but the opportunity to leverage those partnerships to accomplish our goal and to achieve the needs of these societal challenges is really important, and it's really what we're focused on as a new directorate at NSF. And so the Directorate for Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships was created as what we consider a horizontal NSF has, prior to TIP being formed, had 7 directorates, and you can see those as the background in this diagram: biological sciences, engineering, mathematical and physical sciences, computer and information science and engineering, the geosciences, STEM education, and then finally social, behavioral, and economic sciences. And so in addition to these directorates, we have 2 offices. One is the Office of Integrative Activities, and the other is the Office of International Science and Engineering. What we as a directorate do is that we are dedicated to supporting and enhancing the efforts of all of the directorates and offices at the National Science Foundation. So we have no unique special focus technology-wise. We are focused on all of the technologies, science and engineering technologies that NSF serves, by supporting the other directorates and offices and supporting their communities to enhance the translation of ideas out of the basic research lab and into commercialization or societal impact. And so our mission is quite simple. I like to think of this predominantly as the 3 A's. One is advance critical and emerging technologies. We do that through use-inspired basic research that we support as a directorate. The second is to address societal and economic challenges, as I've mentioned. The third A in our mission statement is to accelerate the translation of research results from lab to market. And you'll see that in the programs that we've created as our attempt to support the advancement of the technologies and the translation of these technologies out into the society so they can address these challenges that I've mentioned previously. Also important to what we do is training a diverse workforce. Every program that we have supports engineers and scientists that are working on new and emerging technologies. And as a result of that support, we obviously are bettering the workforce. And you'll see that in many of our cases, in many of our programs, we actually have some very specific workforce development activities that we're doing. And I'll highlight those as we go through the presentation. The way that we accomplish our mission is through 3 primary things: fostering innovation and technology ecosystems. We want to build ecosystems, enable those ecosystems, and enable them not only to start, but to flourish and to be sustainable. The second is that we establish and support translation pathways. We recognize that there's not one pathway that you're going to take when you go from a basic research result out into the marketplace or into societal impact. And so we're working to create multiple pathways through which the results of our basic research can flow to reach society and reach impact. And then finally, as I've mentioned previously, partnering to engage the nation's talents. We are partnering across the board with other federal agencies, with private industry, and private foundations and the like. So that's a secret really to being able to achieve some of the things we're working on. We cannot do it alone. We need to partner in order to achieve the goals that we've set as a directorate. And so I thought I would put this slide in just to give you a sense for what has happened in the creation of TIP. This new directorate has been in existence a little over a year. We were formed in April of 2022. And so you can see that even prior to the formation of the new directorate, we were beginning to launch new programs and to develop new activities to help us achieve this mission. I'm not going to go through all of these. You'll see some of these as I go through our individual programs so that you can relate to them perhaps a little bit better. But I wanted to highlight a couple. On the far left is a partnership with Intel. This is a great example where Intel is jointly funding equally with NSF a semiconductor workforce partnership to try to create the workforce of the future in support of our nation's semiconductor industry. You'll also see along the way a similar program with Micron, another semiconductor company, where we have, again, a workforce development partnership. In the case of Micron, the focus there is on developing the curriculum that's needed, the materials for teaching, and the experiential activities that are needed as you develop the workforce of the future. You can also see a number of programs here, and as I mentioned, I'll go through many of them. I do want to highlight one, though, that shows up on January 10th. This is an activity that we funded with an organization called Noble Reach Emerge. And it's a very different approach than what NSF has done previously. In many of our programs, we kind of wait for the ideas to come to us. We receive the proposals, we evaluate the proposals, and we make decisions on what to fund. In the case of the Noble Reach Emerge pilot, we're working with the Biological Sciences Directorate to proactively identify basic research that they funded that has translation and commercialization potential. So we're working with the program directors in bio to identify these promising basic research programs, and then with Noble Reach Emerge, engaging with those researchers and working with them to develop a translational pathway uniquely for them, to help them understand the steps that it's going to require for them to go from basic research in their lab to commercialization via the translation process. And so it's exciting. It's a pilot, so we're limiting it to 10 basic research programs that we will support. But in addition to having the assistance and the planning and the step-by-step translation map that we are developing for them, we're also going to be providing funding to help them start down that road of moving their idea out of the lab and into the marketplace. And so, as I mentioned, we'll touch on many of these programs as I go through each one side by side in the slides that are upcoming. Now, one of the things that's really important to understand about TIP is that we are trying to power breakthroughs by bridging this gap. You know, this is sometimes called the valley of death. We really prefer to think of it as the valley of opportunity. But what it illustrates is that on the left-hand side is where your foundational and use-inspired basic research is performed. That's mostly funded by the federal government. Once you get into applied research, industry certainly is funding a lot of that, and also they fund a lot of development activities. But as far as basic research is concerned, much of the public funding goes towards that from the National Science Foundation, the Department of Defense, and other agencies. As you go to the right on this slide, you move through a proof of concept, a prototype, eventually a product development, and then ultimately delivery of that product to the marketplace. The private funding really comes into play on the right-hand side. And the reason this valley of death is referred that way is that many things die in the research lab because they do not have the capability or do not have the resources to get across that gap, because that gap can be very, very large from something that's being done, you know, for example, in a lab where you might be making a beaker full of some material. To be able to scale that up and to be able to make hundreds, if not thousands or hundreds of thousands of gallons of that material takes a lot of effort. And it's something that is missing in the public funding that normally occurs, but also missing in the private funding. Private funding typically wants the technology risk to be mitigated before they jump on board. And so our goal at TIP is to create programs that can help bridge this gap, to help get things out of the lab and into the marketplace. And so I'm going to go through a sequence with one slide or so on each of the programs. But I think it's important to understand that these programs are all working together. These programs do not operate in isolation. They work together to try to accomplish the objectives that we have as a directorate. One of our very new and large programs is the Regional Innovation Engine. Regional Innovation Engines have three activities that they focus on, or the characteristics really that have to be a part of their activity. First, they need a societal challenge or an economic challenge that they are going to focus on. That could be climate change, it could be healthcare, it could be education, it could be infrastructure. The blank circle at the right is they can define what that focus is going to be. But they need to have a societal or economic challenge that they are focused on. The second element that they need is a technology focus. They may want to bring artificial intelligence to bear on some of these societal challenges, or advanced wireless technology, or cybersecurity, or quantum, or semiconductors, any of a number. And again, the two blank ones at the right, lower right, are for them to define. So they could actually define the technology focus they have and define the societal challenge or economic challenge that they're going to focus on. The third element is a geographic focus. A regional innovation engine does have a geographic center of gravity that it's focused on developing an innovation ecosystem within that geography. We hope eventually to have these engines spread across the country, covering much of the geography of the nation. We've started, though, and in fact, just recently announced the awarding of approximately 45 planning grants for the regional innovation engines. We had two tracks that were in this solicitation. One was for a planning grant. The other was for a full-blown engine. The full-blown engines will be some of the largest awards that NSF has ever made, $160 million over 10 years. The goal being to conduct use-inspired basic research addressing the technology and challenge that I mentioned, and then to translate that activity out into the marketplace, out into society, and to, in effect, build an innovation and technology ecosystem that's focused on the geography as well as the technology and the challenges. A second program, which is related to the Engines program because it's really designed to enhance partnerships, the enabling partnerships to increase innovation capacity, EPIC. These awards are up to $400,000 for 3 years. The goal is to provide training and networking support to help organizations build more inclusive innovation ecosystems and pathways into the NSF engines. The focus of EPIC is on not the R1 or even the R2 universities, but it's focused on those universities that have outstanding potential, outstanding research, but perhaps have not developed the partnerships and the translational activities that you might find at some of the R1 and R2 universities. So EPIC is to enable partnerships so that we can increase the innovation capacity. The next program is the Convergence Accelerator. This program has been around for 5 or 6 years now. It started prior to the formation of TIP, but it's now a part of the TIP program. The goal of the Convergence Accelerator is to bring together multidisciplinary teams that can focus on a convergent research approach and problem. And so we do this very differently than many NSF programs. First is that we fund phase one, which is really focused on pulling the team together and getting them working together so that they can build upon foundational research to solve a particular problem that requires a multidisciplinary effort. Phase one is up to $750,000 for 9 months. So it's a relatively short execution period. And then the second phase is the implementation phase, where they can receive up to $5 million over 2 years to develop the prototypes of the solution that they proposed and to build a model that will allow this to continue beyond NSF support. Important to transitioning from phase one to phase two is that this team provides a pitch. They will deliver a pitch to program directors and others at the National Science Foundation to determine whether or not they can transition from phase one to phase two. It's designed to move quickly. It's designed to span from ideation all the way to societal impact, conducted in these 2 phases. The other thing that's important about the Convergence Accelerator program is that we have developed multiple tracks along the way. You can see this started in 2019, and each track has a different technology focus. So you can see that we started with open knowledge networks and AI and the future of work. We moved to quantum technology and so forth, all the way through trust and authenticity, to securing wireless infrastructure, food and nutrition, and soon to be announced future cohorts that are labeled here as Track K and Track L. And so teams that are funded in the Convergence Accelerator program go through the process and the program as a cohort. It may be a dozen teams, but those teams are collaborating, working with one another, learning from one another so that they can move their technology forward. The next program is a workforce development program. It's called Excellent Experiential Learning for Emerging and Novel Technologies. And I should have mentioned this, but you'll note on each one of these slides, I include a web link that will show you where you can get more information about that program, including access to a solicitation so that you can actually respond to that solicitation and hopefully submit proposals. The Excellent program, again, is a workforce development activity, and it's really focused on two main things. And one is for training of workers that want to enter the workforce for the first time in a particular emerging technology area. And so one part of it is for entry. A second part of the Excellent program, though, is for pivoting. Someone may be in the workforce. They may have worked for a long time in a certain segment of that workforce, but they want to pivot to a new technology or a new and emerging technology. The Excellent program is focused on funding organizations that can create partnerships between industry, university, community colleges, and others to provide individuals going through the Excellent program a practical learning experience in the form of an internship or it has to be an apprenticeship or an internship, some sort of a paid or compensated experiential learning process that they go through by actually getting into the field, working in an industry, and supporting the development of their skills in that particular technology sector. This is really an interesting one, the NSF Vital. This is one of the first times that we've actually done a prize competition. Normally, NSF receives proposals, reviews those, funds those, and then the individuals go off and do the research that's funded under that award. In the Vital program, Vital stands for Visionary Interdisciplinary Teams Advancing Learning. This is where, and we refer to it as a challenge because we actually fund teams along the way. We don't expect them to actually be able to fund themselves until they get to the end and can win a prize. So we go through stages. A first stage would be a small prize award that would give them the resources they need to go to the next phase. And we are encouraging interdisciplinary teams from all of the science and engineering enterprise. This could include universities, it could include startup companies, small businesses, any organization that wants to try to advance innovative concepts into prototypes for potentially game-changing learning technologies. And so, again, it's a multi-step process where you submit essentially a letter describing your idea. Those are reviewed, and then the result of that is that we select a number of teams to actually receive the first award. And that's a small amount of money, but it's enough money to let them get to the next step, where they have a more substantial deliverable and they are competing for a more substantial sum of money. And so the Vital Prize Competition Prize Challenge is one of the first times that we've done something of this sort. I want to pause here because one of the things that we are encouraging ourselves to do in TIP is that we want to experiment. We want to try some things that NSF maybe has not done before to see how they work. And this is one example of that. You'll see others as we go through the process. Now, the next few programs are what we consider to be our lab to market programs. And so I wanted to preface that with this particular slide because it illustrates what we're trying to do. This is a perfect example. The company that eventually was formed was called NanoView Biosciences. But if you go back to 1996, this all started with an NSF Career Award to a faculty member at Boston University. And so there are a couple of things that are important about this slide. One is that it all started with basic research. And we were able, through subsequent programs, to help translate that basic research out into a company that eventually was acquired. But it started with that basic research. And that's one of our goals. We want to stimulate the movement of ideas out of that basic research lab and into the marketplace. Now, the NSF Career Award was the beginning in 1996. That's a second point I want to make with this slide. And that is that these things take time. From 1996 to 2022, before the startup company was acquired. From 1996 to 2015, before the startup company was funded and formed. Okay, so these things take time, and we recognize that, and that's one of our niches actually, is funding things that are long-term, that are going to take some time to evolve. But this went from basic research in the lab of the principal investigator to a Partnerships for Innovation Award. As you'll see in a few moments when I get to that slide, our Partnerships for Innovation program is a translational research program. It funds universities to demonstrate translation potential of the idea coming out of their basic research. This particular team then went through I-Corps. I-Corps is an entrepreneurial training program. You'll see more on that in a moment. But they completed I-Corps in 2013, and from that, decided that they had an idea that was worthy of forming a company. They formed a company. They applied to our Phase 1 program for our Small Business Innovation Research Program, were successful, and succeeded in garnering a Phase 2 award in 2018. That got them to the point that they were of interest to the private sector. And they, in 2022, were able to raise over $22 million in private funding. And then in 2022, they were acquired by Unchained Labs. But this illustrates what we're trying to accomplish within the Directorate. It's important to note that these things don't always go in this nice linear fashion that I've shown here on this chart. Sometimes you'll find that a team goes through I-Corps, they learn a lot, they'll go back into their lab and they'll adjust their basic research as a result of the learnings that they've obtained. So it doesn't always go in this nice linear fashion, but the point is our programs are trying to build this bridge between the basic research lab and the commercialization of an idea and moving it into the marketplace. So quickly, I'll go through the programs that support this lab to market portfolio and program. The first we refer to as America's Seed Fund. This is our Small Business Innovation Research, Small Business Technology Transfer Program. You know, I'm amazed when I talk to people how many people didn't realize NSF had an SBIR and STTR program. The reality is that NSF started the program back in the 70s. It then spread to the remainder of the federal agencies that conduct basic research or fund basic research. But NSF started the program. So we have decades of really focusing on trying to stimulate startup formation and supporting those companies. Now, the second point I want to make with the slide is that our focus is very different from some of our colleagues at other federal agencies. For example, you take NASA or the Department of Defense. Those mission-oriented agencies have problems that they need to solve in order to achieve their mission, either defense of the nation or space activities and so forth. So they have a problem list, and they want to fund research at small businesses to lead to solutions to those problems. NSF doesn't have a problem list of that sort. So our focus is on funding startups. We want to be the first money the startup company receives. We want to fund them when they have technical risk. They may not know that they can accomplish technically the idea that they have. That's when we want to fund them, because the private sector is not interested in funding them at that stage. So we're focused on true startups. Most of our companies were founded in the last 5 years. Most of them have 1, 2, or 3 employees, but 95% of them have 10 or fewer. So they're brand new companies. They have a technical innovation that's risky, but has great potential if they can mitigate the technology risk. We want to fund them to mitigate that technology risk. And we do so in several phases. Phase 1 is up to $275,000 for up to 12 months of work. They then, if they have a phase 1, they qualify to go on to phase 2 to compete for a phase 2 award. A phase 2 award is up to $1 million for 2 years. And then we have a phase 2B program, and that's up to $500,000, where we will match private funding or non-NSF funding if they can achieve it. And our goal there is to stimulate a private investor to come into this company. So they can get $500,000, 50 cents for each dollar of private money, up to $500,000, 50 cents for each dollar of private money. So if they can go raise $1 million, they can qualify to receive up to $500,000 from NSF. NSF doesn't take any equity. It's not a loan, it's a grant. So this is incentivizing a private investor to come in, because they're going to get $1.5 million of effort in this company, resources in this company, but it's only going to be their $1 million that's going to take equity out. And so it's an incentive for private investors to come on board and take this company the rest of the way. And we're very proud of the success that our companies have. You can see we've had over the last, and these numbers are over the last 5 years, we've had over 200 of our companies successfully exit, either through acquisitions, mergers, or initial public offerings. And we've had them receive over $14 billion in follow-on institutional financing. And so we're very proud of the program. We like to brag. We funded Qualcomm when they were a startup many, many years ago. They've obviously been very successful. We funded Symantec, which was a cybersecurity company, when they were a startup. They've obviously been very successful. More recently, we funded a company called Ginkgo Bioworks. It came out of one of our engineering research centers at NSF. The idea did. And Ginkgo Bioworks went through a path very similar to the chart I showed earlier. They went through I-Corps. They went through PFI. They became a small business. We funded them in phase 1 and phase 2, and they now are a publicly traded company. So our goal is to achieve those types of results with what we refer to as America's Seed Fund, investing in risky technology. Innovation Core. I-Corps is I like to refer to it as an entrepreneurial training program. The goal is to spur translation of fundamental research to the marketplace, but it's also to train faculty and students and other researchers that are funded by NSF in innovation and entrepreneurship skills. And they use this training to conduct customer discovery so that they can identify and explore whether their idea has a match to the marketplace. One of the reasons that we started this program in 2012 is that we noticed that a lot of startups coming out of universities failed because they created a product nobody wanted. They did not have an alignment with a market need. And so there was no one out there in the marketplace that was willing to pay for the product that they were offering. And so we created I-Corps to help with the training on product market fit. So what the team is doing, and this is pre-company formation, but what the team is doing is that they're going through an exercise to try to develop a value proposition for their product idea that aligns with a need in the marketplace. So it's all about product market fit. The team consists of a minimum of 3 people. It's usually 3, sometimes 4 or 5, but a team has 3 people. There's a technology lead, which is an expert on the technology. That is normally a faculty member. There's an entrepreneurial lead, and that's normally a student. It's someone that is interested in starting a company that wants to see if they have an idea that merits forming a company. And then the third member of a team is a mentor. This is someone that has done it before. They've started a company and they've moved a product to the marketplace, or they've worked within a large company and moved products to the marketplace. They understand how to get something from the initial idea stage to a product that you're delivering to the marketplace. And so our team will go through the training. The training is actually delivered. The execution of this program is delivered by 10 I-Core hubs. You can see in the map, the dots represent the locations of those. The grayed in states are where we have universities involved in this program. So we have approximately 100 universities that are engaged in these 10 hubs. And so the I-Core program has trained over 7,600 individuals and stimulated the formation of over 1,300 startup companies since its beginning. Our next program is for open source ecosystems. We recognize, and this goes back to the point that I made earlier, that we want to build different pathways depending upon what makes sense for the technology and the people that are involved in that technology. And so we created a program called Pathways to Enable Open Source Ecosystems. As the name implies, we're trying to build an open source environment that enables that idea, that technology, that product to be delivered via open source. And so, Linux, for example, is one example that came out through the open source mechanism. So we want to foster that coming out of research labs and stimulating an open source ecosystem. We funded in last September, we funded approximately 25 phase 1 awards, and we are just in the process of finalizing the first phase 2 awards that should be announced any day now. Our next program is PFI, Partnerships for Innovation. This is a translational research program. The goal of the program, as the name implies, is to support NSF-funded researchers to build a prototype, prove the concept by running an experiment, investigate whether the technology can scale to where it would be feasible in the marketplace, and also to discover the commercial potential. So we have 2 tracks to this particular program. One is called the Technology Translation track, up to $550,000 for 18 to 24 months. The other is called the Research Partnerships track, up to $1 million for 36 months, up to 36 months. As the name implies, the research partnership track requires an industry partner because we recognize that in many cases, it's going to be a license to a larger company that's going to be completed rather than the stimulation of a startup. So what we find is individuals, researchers that are interested in startup formation typically apply to the technology translation track because they want to translate that technology out themselves. Whereas those that are more interested in a licensing arrangement would apply to the research partnership track because they've developed a relationship with a potential industry partner that might be interested in helping them develop the technology, licensing the technology, and getting it out into the commercial sector. So Partnerships for Innovation is our translational research program. ART, Accelerating Research Translation, certainly related to PFI, obviously. But ART is really supporting institutions of higher education to build their capacity and to build the infrastructure to strengthen and scale the translation of basic research outcomes. ART is focused on not those universities that already do this and do it really well, but it's focused on those kind of mid-tier universities that have great research programs, but have less experience and less background in translating those results out into the marketplace. And so ART is funding up to $6 million over 4 years to help that university build that capacity, build the infrastructure to support their faculty and students in the process of translating research results out into the market. So that's our ART program. The next program is an entrepreneurial fellows program. And again, the goal of this program is to support an individual that has a really good idea and wants to nurture that idea and hopefully translate and move that idea out into a startup company. So the fellowship is up to 2 years, $350,000. Part of that money, approximately $80,000 a year, will go to pay a stipend. So it's comparable to what you would see as a postdoc. But what we're doing in this program is immersing that fellow into an environment that can help them nurture their idea. It can provide them training, which we support as part of the program. It can provide them access to special equipment that they might not have resources to get access to otherwise, access to expertise. They might be embedded in an environment, for example, to conduct this 2-year fellowship where there are experts on a particular technology that their idea is relevant to, and they want to be able to access those experts as well as special equipment that they might need in order to nurture this idea. The goal is that once they get through this fellowship program, I'd love to see them starting a company. It may mean that they need to go through I-Corps. It may mean that they have some other activities within our programs that they want to take advantage of. But the goal here is to stimulate startup formation, to stimulate the movement of an idea from them out into the marketplace. I've shown at the bottom of this slide the fellowship timeline. We just completed this for this year's cohort of fellows, but it started back in August. There's an online, in fact, if you go to the link that I've listed at the bottom of the slide, you can see the application process for the next, once the next cohort is announced, there'll be a timeline associated with that, but you can expect that it's going to be very similar to the timeline that I've shown here, starting in August and moving through a selection process that culminates in March with a new cohort of entrepreneurial fellows. This is our Activate Fellows program. Important to this program is that we actually are using the term Activate Anywhere. Okay, so we're not, this Activate started in the Northern California area, so it's the Bay Area, and so obviously a hotbed of startup formation. They also have operations in Cambridge, Boston area, another hotbed. But the new program, Activate Anywhere, is designed to allow this fellow to be placed wherever it makes the most sense to be placed, including any geographic location within the country. So that's my last slide, the conclusion of the summary of our programs. I do want to point you to our web link so that you can learn the latest from TIP. One of the other things that's important about that web link is you'll be able to search and see activities that are ongoing, solicitations that are out, dates for submission of proposals, lots of information that you can learn from that website. So I encourage you to take a look at it. You can read more about our programs, our mission, our focus, the opportunities that we have for funding. We also have a newsletter, and you can register to receive that and learn more about TIP. So with that, I'm really looking forward to answering your questions and also providing you any additional information that I can. I'm delighted to be with you today, delighted to have a chance to engage with you. I will also provide my email address so that you have access to that. If you want to reach out to me directly and personally, I'm happy to do that and happy to engage with you. So thank you so much. Appreciate your time and look forward to answering your questions.
Okay, great. Thank you, Barry. Welcome back. Thank you, Barry, for answering a lot of the questions that have come in the Q&A, and we do have some time. So I do encourage you to continue to submit your questions in the Q&A, and we'll answer them in the time we have left. I did want to kind of as I was looking at the questions that were coming in, I was noticing that a lot of them were centered on whether, on eligibility types of questions. And, one of the things, whether you're looking at a funding opportunity in the TIP Directorate or elsewhere at the National Science Foundation, you always want to make sure to focus on the eligibility section of that specific funding opportunity, because it's going to let you know specifically the types of organizations that are eligible to submit proposals. It could be that funding opportunity does not restrict eligibility at all outside of the requirements that are in the proposal and award policies and procedures guide, or it could, for example, restrict submissions to institutions of higher education or some other type of specialized eligibility requirements. So it's always a good idea to make sure you're focusing on the eligibility requirements at the beginning when you're thinking about submitting a proposal to a specific opportunity. We had a session, Barry, earlier this week covering the merit review process at NSF. And I was hoping you could maybe just talk generally about how faculty and researchers can get involved with reviewing proposals for the various programs in the TIP Directorate.
Yes, I'm happy to do that. And I appreciate all the questions that have been coming in. I've been trying to answer them as quickly as I can. I would encourage you, if I don't get to an answer, please send me an email. I'll be happy to take it offline and respond to it. So in terms of merit review, there are a couple of things that are really important. I think we do use the standard merit review process for all of our programs within TIP. And so and that process requires that we have a minimum of 3 independent experts review the proposal. And so to Jeremy's point about getting engaged with TIP, if you're interested in being a reviewer, you can send me your bio. I'll be happy to distribute it to our program director team, and they can get you on the list to serve as a reviewer. In some of our programs, like the SBIR and STTR program, we look not only for technical experts, but we also look for commercialization or market experts. So if you have expertise in a particular industry sector in terms of understanding the market and understanding translation to that particular market, we welcome that, and we really want to engage with those individuals as well. One thing that's important about the merit review process is that it is advisory to the program director. So that's something, a program director is going to spend a lot of time looking at that proposal. They're going to spend a lot of time looking at the reviews. Most of our review processes also use a panel. So we'll bring together reviewers to talk about the proposal, and in our directorate, we, as in many of the NSF directorates, we have the panel actually rate the proposal as highly competitive, competitive, or not competitive. And so the reviews themselves, the panel summary and panel rating, all is input to the program director, who ultimately has the responsibility to make a recommendation to me as a division director on whether or not an award should be funded. Our programs are competitive. I mean, I wish we had more resources. Our programs, though, are really competitive. In our small business program, SBIR, STTR, we typically are able to fund about 15% of the proposals that we receive. But I do want to make one other point about that program, because we've structured a process there that we hope is beneficial. And that is that we start that process, the SBIR and STTR program process, with a pitch. And a pitch is 3 pages. You submit it online. You don't have to have a company to submit a pitch, so you can be an individual with an idea, and we review that pitch, and then we either invite you to submit a full proposal or not. If you are invited, then you would form your company and get it legally structured. But it allows you to very quickly, if you have an idea, submit that idea, have it reviewed by the program director team, and get a response on whether it's a good fit for our program, because we are looking for technical innovations there. And so I encourage you to take a look at the links on each of these sites. You'll see much more information on who's eligible to submit, as well as the process for submission.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go through the questions as they've come in here, so you can see them in the Q&A. But the first one is asking about the number of proposals received for the art program. You may not have that information at the tip of your fingertips.
I do not have that information. We normally, we normally announce both the number and the recipient of award recipients. But I think in general, what you find with NSF overall is that the success rate is somewhere in the 20 to 24% range, depending upon the program and so forth. That you'll find as a success rate. But I don't have the specific number of proposals that came in via the art program. And
go ahead. Did you were gonna?
Yeah, I can. I mean, if you want me to go through the list.
Sure. Go. That's fine. Yeah, it's up to you. Go ahead.
The Activate Fellows program. This program is not limited to postdocs, although we do find that it is very attractive to the postdoc community. They are excited about their technology, excited about potentially starting a company, but it's not limited to that community. The total funding available to an Activate Fellow is $350,000 over 2 years, up to $350,000 over 2 years, and so we typically find that the stipend for the individual is in that $75,000 to $85,000 range. So it's significant. And it does present a good opportunity for PhDs that want to do a postdoc that's more focused on innovation and entrepreneurship rather than an academic career. But it's not limited to postdocs. The next question is, much of the funding seems targeted at universities. We certainly, most of our programs are not limited to universities, so you can have nonprofit research organizations that can apply. Some of our programs accept applications from for-profit companies. The POSE program, for example, allows a for-profit entity to apply. The SBIR program requires that it be a for-profit company. So please go back and look at the links that I provided, and you'll see the eligibility criteria. But not-for-profit research institutes are almost always acceptable as an applicant in most of the programs, with the exception of SBIR and STTR. The next question deals with help on writing a proposal. One of the things that I encourage people to do is to reach out to our program directors. They are always happy to have a conversation. They can give you guidance on whether or not your idea is a good fit. You can reach out to me and I can connect you to the right program director. So we don't help write the proposal, but we can give you guidance on what we're looking for and the types of things that'll be a good fit for the program. I see a question about a technology innovation hub at a predominantly undergraduate institution. We certainly encourage that in many of our programs. For example, we have good ideas that are emerging from undergraduate and predominantly undergraduate institutions. So again, without going program by program, I do encourage you to look at the websites and make sure that you have the right eligibility requirements there. An R2 looking to develop infrastructure to build capacity in tech translation. Those are exactly the types of things that ART is interested in supporting. Infrastructure, including people as well as resources or facilities, might be a part of that as well. Medical innovations, we do support, in our programs, a lot of medically related technology. We do not support clinical trials. That's something that NIH does quite a bit of, but certainly we have medical devices, we have medical, innovations and other applications in many of our programs. So I would encourage you to bring those ideas to us. Second, the comment by an anonymous attendee. more and more NSF funding is being targeted strictly to IAGs rather than including research nonprofits. I think that traditionally, I think NSF has predominantly funded the university environment, but one of the reasons that we created TIP is that we wanted to do things differently. We're trying things. And so, for example, I mentioned the Noble Reach Emerge. I mean, Noble Reach Emerge is an organization that we're funding, and they are certainly not a university. They are, in fact, a not-for-profit institution. So I would encourage you to reach out to me. I'm happy to have a conversation with you. But with the TIP Directorate, we are certainly looking to expand our horizons beyond the traditional university environment.
Great. It looks like, Barry, that we don't have any current questions, but Barry did put his email address in the chat. So if you think of something later, please do feel free to reach out to him there. I want to thank Barry for presenting today and all of you for joining us for all the sessions that we've had this week and will continue to have. Take care, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all so much.